Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Beyond Trauma podcast for another really special conversation. Feeling super inspired and excited to introduce you to this very special yoga teacher, life learner, 3.5 Acres Yoga, trauma-informed yoga teacher training grad, and trauma survivor himself, Demetrius Napolitano. You might have seen Demetrius on Instagram Live with me a couple months ago. And after that conversation, I really wanted to dedicate more time to him and his story and to amplifying the work that he's doing. So I hope you'll take a listen to this conversation. And of course, I hope that you will join us at 3.5 Acres Yoga for our next trauma-informed yoga teacher training, which is going to be online the last weekend of September. September 27th to 29th, featuring myself and two incredible guest teachers for the first time ever at our training, Juvenile and Reggie Hubbard. Teaching guest segments at the training is going to be pretty amazing. So you can still enroll for that at 3.5acres.org. But for now, I want you to focus on this story, this very special story, Demetrius's story. When he was just under a year old, Demetrius was placed in New York City foster care system. He was adopted at 10 and then put back into foster care years later before getting adopted a second time at 20. After experiencing 30 different placements, he transitioned from the system when he was 22. During this time in foster care, Demetrius was physically, verbally, and sexually abused, placed on psychotropic medications to treat depression, ADHD, and PTSD. He even had a short stay at juvenile detention and a psychiatric hospital before deciding that he needed to take charge of his life. And you're going to hear about his story on the podcast and the different moments along the way that helped him to make that realization. But also, he was reacting, like I say in the podcast many times, in a normal way to unnormal circumstances that he was thrown into as a young child, with no real agency. After graduating from St. John's University with his associates in business management, he graduated from New York University with a bachelor's in political science. And in 2019, after being introduced to practice and meditation, Demetrius started a GoFundMe, raised over $17,000, and traveled to India to study further how to use yoga meditation to help him heal from the complex trauma that he incurred from the foster criminal and mental institutions. When Demetrius returned from his healing journey in June of 2020, he founded Fostering Meditation to help young people nurture their mental development through the same tools he would later call 5 steps to wellness: meditation, yoga, expressive writing, community, and nutrition. Demetrius envisions bringing fostering meditation to youth within and without the foster care system nationally and creating more communities of people breathing, meditating, and healing together. He's doing incredible work, and I want to call on all of us to support it in whatever ways that we can. Here we go.
Cross.
There we go. Take 2. This happened last time.
No.
So everyone, I'm here with Demetrius, who you met hopefully at our IG Live. We had such a nice conversation that I wanted to take some time to have a longer conversation and a better connection. we had, and I don't usually have this, so I don't know. Maybe we just have too much energy running through us. So, Demetrius, as folks might know, and as I probably say in the intro, we know each other because you went through the 3.5 Acres trauma-informed yoga teacher training. And, but if, you were someone who came in also with a lot of, experience already and vision. And I think you had already started your organization or, so you kind of knew what you were doing, what you wanted to get out of the training. And you've been doing such beautiful work. So I wanted to amplify that. And also, through our conversation on the IG Live, just got to know more of your personal story. And I think, there's a lot that could be a lot of lessons, a lot that people can gain from learning about you. So I don't know where you want to start, but maybe you can just share with folks a little bit about your background and kind of where you came from, and maybe we can dig into how you were able to overcome like quite a bit of adversity.
Yeah, yeah, of course. And it's, as always, it's a pleasure to be here in community with you as well. And I laugh when as soon we got on, the connection started to mess up again. But we got fortitude because we know that these conversations are important. So I'm grateful to be here again. So once again, my name is Demetrius Napolitano. I just to give a little background about myself. I spent 22 years in foster care. So my biological name is Tisharon Taylor. But when I got adopted at 10 years old, the parent I lived with since I was 5, she changed it to Demetrius to Sharon Johnson. And within those first 7 years living in this foster home, it was a lot of trauma that happened initially with physical, sexual, verbal abuse that I experienced, not knowing how to deal with my emotions. So they put me on medication, Ritalin, Adderall, Tenex, and it was like two others. And then I lost my mother when I was 10 years old. So right around the adoption, my mother died of cancer, whom I didn't really know growing up as a child. Alongside um, just going through that daily traumatic experiences, living in a home, not feeling a part of, and just the challenges that presented to me as a 10, 13-year-old little boy. um, in that home, she also did something else that really altered my life, was place me inside of the Fresh Air Fund, which is where I lived with Amish family for between 5 to 13 every summer for 2 to 4 weeks.
Okay.
And so I bring them up especially because now, me being a meditation, yoga teacher, etc., who's mindful about nutrition and all of those things, I really now see how God was really preparing me for this long ago. Because even with the Amish, with the Amish community, they're very traditional. Everything that we ate either came from the garden, from the creek, from the neighbors' residence. And so, as I was growing up, I still had these pockets of wellness that was beginning to brew up in my life, especially for someone. Wellness is not as important to the well, rather it's towards the sick or the injured, or to those who are mentally unwell, that it's like, okay, let me work on my wellness so I can increase that. And so, but throughout these early formative years in my life, all of those traumatic experiences just really just felt like weights on my life. And so then I started smoking a lot of weed and just hanging out with the wrong crowd. It was, and had a lot of, okay.
Yeah, no, I'm just thinking like, that's it. You were saying how you didn't know how to like regulate your emotions or deal with your emotions, but I wanted to say, of course not, right? You were a child, and a child needs a attachment figure that they can trust, that's steady, and it's through the co-regulation and the security of that figure that we figure out how to deal with our emotions. And so, for folks who have that early abandonment, that don't have like a steady, secure home, you of course didn't have those early opportunities to really be in a safe kind of relationship.
Yeah, and that was challenging because even the relationships that I had, a lot of them were, not saying all of them, but there were a few that were so traumatic and abusive that obviously impacted my ability to connect with other people. And then,
Yeah.
for instance, like, people, they placed me in therapy, and mm, those therapists were white women, and there's nothing wrong inherently with that, but there's a lack of connection, because I'm this little black boy growing up in East Harlem, and you are a white woman that grew up in this, suburban, or I don't know how they grew up, but it was just when I was in these spaces, I wasn't really releasing what was going on within me, so these things are brewing up within me. And so, I
They
didn't.
weren't really safe. You didn't know if they
Yeah,
were going to report on you. And even if you were in an unsafe home, there's something to a child. It's more safe to be in an unsafe home where they know, than necessarily get that adult in trouble. Or, what if they leave you in that home and the adult finds out that you shared something? That the fact that the child is put in therapy, but it's really you're not reacting incorrectly, or you're reacting correctly to a situation that's incorrect,
Yeah, yeah, and there
you
were
know?
times where I shared things with the therapist, and then they went back and told my adopted mother, and then I was ostracized in the home. And this was
Yeah.
another example of me feeling like the other,
Mm.
and how that just continued to traumatize me and feel like make me feel like as if I'm not worthy or I'm not enough. And for any person, but especially little black boys growing up in East Harlem, and then growing up in foster care, and then not having the family, their biological family members around, you get to believing that you are nothing, and then that you are worth nothing. And I'll never forget, about when somewhere around when I was like 16, 17, I went back to this agency that served me called Northside Center. And the receptionist still worked there at the time. And I remember we were talking. She was like, yeah, when you were 5 years old, someone came up and pinched your cheeks and was like, oh my God, you're so handsome. You're so cute. And I said, I'm not handsome. I'm a piece of trash. And so when
Oh,
she
wow.
said that, I'll never forget it. She was like, I started praying for you right then and there, because like, why is a 5 year old boy talking about he's a piece of trash? And so, but these are the things that sometimes those foster parents and in those homes that they instilled in me. And so it was a lot of, and then it was became a lot of self-inflicting trauma, especially as I matured into a young teenager, et cetera. And the things that I, tried to cope with and through, such as, the relationships that I had, the marijuana addiction, just to escape what was going on presently in my life. And then, you had all the medications that I was on that drugged me up, and it made me feel numb even more so to the discomfort and the pain that I was experiencing. Then you couple that with all of the abuses that no one really helped me to navigate through. But these are layers that are just bottled in within me, and I'm not talking to no one about it. I'm just bottling it in, and that's just brewing up a lot of hatred and anger and frustration, anxiety, stress, all of those things within me.
Was there anyone in your life, like, was there a person that you did feel comfortable around or could trust at that time, or?
Yeah, so I was very grateful because Steve Jobs once said you can only connect the dots looking backwards, and when I do look back, I always see God's hand in my life. And for instance, when I re-entered foster care at 13 years old, that's when I lived with this one family, the adoptive family from 5 to 13, and then when I was placed back into the system, that's when I met my social worker, who stayed with me until 13 to about 19 years old, 20 years old, until she had got pregnant, etc. But she was someone that was such a pillar in my life during those extremely important years. And I'll never forget when I was put inside of the side of a non-secure detention. And at this moment, at 15 years old, I had completely given up on life. And I told her, I said, Miss Ince, just leave me like everyone else did. And she said something that changed me. She said, Demetrius, you will leave me before I ever leave you. And that was so crucial, because even when I was inside of this secure detention, I reached out to my adoptive mother, who at the time was like, hey, you wanted the world to share on, and now you have it. And so it was like, I'm already down and you kicking me even further. And at the time, my oldest brother was also in prison. So it just seemed that that was going to be the trajectory for both of our lives.
Yeah.
But that social worker being there, and shout out to all the social workers who really just put their heart and soul into the work every day, and are not told thank you enough, because she really altered the trajectory of my life. Because had it not been for that one person who was consistent, persistent, and just full of unconditional love and understanding towards me, and I don't know where I would be. And just a real fast story, I remember when I was placed back into foster care at 13, and I was assigned to her. They had I had seen a psychiatrist who sat down with me for 5 minutes. And then after that 5 minute conversation, he extended the medications to two more. So essentially, I was going to be on between 5 to 7 different medications. And she went in there and was like, how can you place him on more medication after just having a 5 minute conversation with him? And then he rescinded his decision. So it was,
Uh,
if I really needed that, then the doctor or the psychiatrist would have been like, hey, these are the reasons why I'm assigning this, etc., and this is what's going to help Demetrius to share on in the long run. But it
yeah.
was obviously just to get another little black boy hooked on these medications, and who knows what the longer term implications of that is. But that
That's right.
advocacy really changed that moment for me, and
This
showed that this person's here.
so many lessons in that story, like not just a little side story. That's, there's so much there. I mean, advocacy is major, and where, any of us can use our voices, because that just made him pause and someone was watching enough. And I always say, I mean, there's definitely a place for medication, but I always say, prescribers want to prescribe because that's what they do. Surgeons want to do surgery. It's hard to find a surgeon that's going to say, you don't need surgery, go do some
Right.
stretches, because they look at it with that lens. So whether it was malicious or not, that's how they look at things, and it becomes kind of limited. I'm so curious, not to like make everything about race, but you were talking about the white women. Was your social worker a woman of color,
Well,
or?
she's black, and that really impacted me because once again I didn't grow up with my mom, and like daughters need their fathers, sons need their mothers, and vice versa. But
Mm,
especially for a little black boy that didn't really feel comforted in his home, and many times I ran away and was placed in psychiatric ward house at 10, 11 years old. And so I was in a lot of situations where I think honestly a lot of those headaches would have been not happened had someone just wrapped me in their arms and just told me they love me, and
yeah,
would have saved me from looking from that love in my relationships with the women that I dated at those years of my life, etc. And but she, Miss Ince, a Black Caribbean woman who just really loved on me in the most professional and authentic way that she could, and really just those words, "You will leave me before I ever leave you," was at that moment a lowest moment in my life, and handcuffs in the back of in a cell, so to speak. And she's like, look, I know this is a low moment for you, but I'm still going to be here for you. And even when I
wow,
was inside of this detention center, she came and visited to me on a Sunday when she after she jogged by, and she's not getting paid for that, but that's because she cared. And that was transformative for me because it was like I just needed someone to believe in me, just like I
yes,
needed someone to hug me and hold me. And she couldn't really do that, but she believed in me and showed me that unconditional support, and that was what bolstered my confidence in myself. And then eventually, I would pull myself out of these abysses.
yeah, wow, yeah. What people don't understand is, when someone goes through like early abandonment, mistrust with adults, they're going to like repeat that. They're going to push people away. They're going to start doing those things to recreate those patterns because that's all they know. And they're going to try to push someone away before they can leave them. So every way that you reacted is so natural, and it's so good that you found someone that could like disrupt that pattern for you. I'm curious about the time with the Amish. So were you in the city? I mean, that must have been such a culture shock to suddenly be like shipped out to the Amish. Were you mad you were going out there at first?
No, no, honestly, when I say that they quote unquote saved my childhood, they really did. And I say that because I'm that's one thing Mrs. Johnson, my first adopted mother, did that I'm so grateful for it to this day. Because actually, this weekend I'm going out to Amish country to hang out with them for their family gathering, annual gathering. And but she placed me inside of the Fresh Air Fund at 5 years old because she thought that this would be a good time for me to just get out of the city, get out of my anger, get out of my environment, and just be thrusted into a new environment that may help me. And in so many things that they change, I remember when just speaking to my mom, my Amish mom and dad recently, and we talked about this, because I'm writing this book now, and they talked about, hey, when they sent the medications and said, give this to you, we never gave it to you. And the Amish were very, and still to this day, my parents are in their 60s, but they're moving and grooving like they're 30 with their strength because everything they eat is from the farm, from their garden, from their creek, or it's locally grown, organic. And so they didn't believe that putting children on medications was in the child's long-term best interest. And so that's probably the reason why I eventually took myself off the medication, because when I was with them, we wasn't taking no medication. They was giving me different types of natural grown foods, etc. And ultimately they also showed me what a functional normal family should, and how they should operate, and that dysfunction is not normal. One little needle in it is that it was also the space where I became aware that I was black, and
Oh
that
yeah.
we went to church. I mean, they had I just stayed in their community, their home, it didn't really hit me until we went to church, and now we're in a church building, and a lot of people are staring at me, especially the kids and some of the older folks. And I do appreciate my sister telling me this recently. She said, some of the members of the church didn't really go out their way to make you feel comfortable. So when you would run out of the church in the middle of the service and then go run to the cornfields and stay there and ball up in a ball and hold yourself, that was because this was another moment of trauma where you was like, oh, here I am in another space where I don't have no one and I'm alone, etc. But shout out to my siblings, because one of them would, or two of them, etc., would come out and try to comfort me and tell me like, hey, they call me Tish from Tesharon. It's like a little nickname they gave me. So they'd be like, yo, Tish, we love you, we're here for
Mhm.
you, etc. And I would push them away, and it was a couple of years where they were like, we don't know if we're going to get him back again, because he is a lot, as far as just the things that I would do to push them away. But they was just like, you know what? At the end of every time when they would bring me back to the bus so the bus can bring me back to New York, because it was in Honeybrook, PA, I would just bawl out in tears, and they it broke their heart every time I would leave, because they was like, wow, yeah, he might have acted crazy for the past 2 3 weeks or so, but now it just shows how much he does care for us and he does appreciate this time. And so even now, when I'm now as this wellness teacher and coach, it makes sense, because my whole life, even with the heartaches and the traumas and the anxieties, etc., it I had these moments of wellness practices that begin to brew up in my life, that I was like,
Mhm.
oh, I know how to eat healthy, because the Amish taught me about natural eating, and that they didn't eat a lot of the toxic stuff that we are consuming today, etc. And they taught me the importance of community and family. Um, and the structure that they applied, they had in their home, that they still have in their home. But waking up at 6 o'clock in the morning, starting off with singing prayer songs, and then eating
Mhm.
breakfast at the table. Um, even at night when we before we go to bed, when we're singing prayer songs, before we drive, we praying. And so all of it, who would have thought, right? The Amish would be the foundation of my belief now in God. And, my adopted mother, she was a Jehovah's Witness. So we went to church like maybe once a year or so. So, but she wasn't that spiritually aware, if you will. But the
Mhm.
Amish really were, and I'm so grateful for them, because even all the pictures they took of me as a child, they put together in this thick book and made it so many designs that they put together, to just magnify those pictures, and they gave it to me, and that's the only pictures that I do have of myself as a child. And so when I
Wow.
say that they saved my childhood and saved those good memories, I'm just so eternally grateful. Um,
So much
even
again.
Yeah.
Like so much there, as far as you and I have spoken a lot about previously the importance of environment and, just the stress of a natural environment, what that alone can do to us. You were able to be outdoors, fresh air, fresh food, and that was, obviously very healing for your nervous system, and see good, see relationships that were healthy and have a good structure. When you talk about chanting, singing prayers, that's, that's chanting, and it actually regulates, our vagal nervous system. So chanting, singing, in any tradition, um, can regulate our nervous system, calm us down, make us feel more connected. That's why moms sing to their babies. All comes from the same thing. It's a vibration that's very healing. And it sounds like connecting to a bigger power has also been something very important to you. Um, yeah, if you want to speak
Yeah,
to
because I mean, it's just when I look back on my life, and even when I re-entered the foster care system at 13, and then from 13 to 22, as I remained in the system, that was 25 different foster homes that I went to, which averages out to like 3 4 5, about 3 to 4 homes a year. And so I could have, and even when I look back, I'm like, what, I'm somewhat grateful for all of those homes, because one thing that it did, outside of just connecting me to different cultures and religions, etc., it also kept me on the move from being um, attached, or community wrapping me around its arms in a negative light, like certain gang members, or or toxic relationships or community. You know what I mean? Like I was able to, oh, I'm here just for a day or or a couple of weeks or so, and I
That's really interesting.
yeah, because these communities at that time, some of them were a lot of the false homes. Unfortunately, are in the projects and lower economic backgrounds of folks, and so it sometimes can be very nerve wracking being in some of those communities. And so I didn't really ever get sucked into any of those communities because I was always on the move. So then I'm like, well, had I stayed in, Brownsville, not to, put any shame on Brownsville because that was the home for me for a couple of months. But I'm like, hey, I would have easily got into a confrontation with the dudes on the corner or around the way because I was often a hothead growing up. And so, but because I was always moving, even if I had some beef or some conflict with folks before they knew it, I was gone. And then when they
You're out. Oh, that's
so,
it. That's very insightful. That's very insightful, actually. Tell me about like, so when did things change for you? I mean, I know that it's life is a lot of little moments, so you're kind of taking us there.
Mhm.
With these little blips of kindness, of exposure to other ways of living. But can you identify a moment later where like there was a big
Yeah,
shift?
yeah, definitely. So really, that moment when my social worker told me she was going to be there for me no matter what, that's when I kind of was like, there was a shift in my paradigm and how I first viewed myself. Because now I'm like, I'm actually worthy of someone loving me and someone staying in my corner. And so from then, I re-enrolled back in high school because at that moment I actually had dropped out because I didn't have enough clothes. And I'll never forget my adopted mother. At the time, we had a very fragile relationship and broken relationship. But she told the social worker, she said, "You created this monster, so then you provide clothing for him." And so at the time, I had like made because I often ran away as a child, but I always went back eventually because I didn't have nowhere else to go. And so when I ran away the last time at 13 to a family member home in Brooklyn that I connected to on Facebook, I thought that I would go back eventually, but then it was the moment where I was like, I'm not going back. And so, um, and Miss and she once again advocated for me, got me a stipend so I can get some more clothes, and then I re-enrolled back in high school, and then got into college, and so things started to look up for me at those moments. Um, and it was really, as far as it pertains to my mental health, where I started to be taking care of it. One part of it was joining what at the time it was called the We Deserve Love 2 campaign. And that was started by Jamel Robinson, who is a good friend and actually sits on my board. But he also grew up in foster care, and his nonprofit was to get young people to share their stories. And so at 16, that's when I really started to share my story growing up in foster care in front of big crowds. I remember several times I didn't broke down in the middle of crowds because it was a lot to just share these very intimate moments of my childhood and things that I experienced. But that helped me to be extremely vulnerable with other young people who were in foster care, opened up and comforted me, etc. And so this was the beginning of my healing journey. And then eventually I would meet my second adopted parents, John and Katie Napolitano, who started off as mentors. And then eventually they adopted me, and it was John who got me into meditation. And so now when I got into meditation, I was like, I met John and Katie when I was 19, but I didn't get into meditation until I was about 23. And it was at that moment when he first introduced me to the practice that I became aware that I could use my breath to recenter myself. And that was revolutionary because all of the other means in which they tried to calm me down, either medication, a psychiatrist. When they put me in a psychiatric ward house and they put me in a straitjacket and stuck a right needle in my buttocks, uh, and all of these other harmful means of controlling me, and no one said, Demetrius, breathe, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so when he rang those bells and helped me center my breath from a very we were moving some couches into my apartment, and it was so a moment where my heart rate is fast, and then you helping me center myself through breath. I'm like, wait, hold on, this is you actually onto something. This is really cool. I want to learn more about this. And then from there, we went to a meditation hall where we sat, and it was the first time I sat down for 20 minutes to meditate. And that was once again revolutionary because now we were talking about a child who had ADHD and um, all of these disorders, and couldn't sit still. Now that I'm proving myself wrong, first and foremost, that I could sit still for 20 minutes and just focus on the breath or sensations, etc. But just cultivating that stillness in those 20 minutes. And then now I'm like, oh God, this is this is really transforming me. And then, as the story fast forward to going to different meditation halls, now I'm captivated by meditation. And then once I graduated from NYU in 2019, I was like, okay, I got to go to India to study this more. Now, by 23 years old, then I left right before September, right before the pandemic, and then and I'm so grateful that I did leave. I left September 29th, which was my mother's birthday, so it was like a kind of honoring her on this journey. And I'm so grateful that I did go when I did, because had I waited and said, let me go during my birthday, which is October 11th, or after the New Year or so, COVID happened, and no one was gonna crowdfund for me to go study meditation to deal with my anxiety when they was dealing started to deal with their anxiety. And so it was
Yeah.
really a changing moment for me.
Yeah. Yeah, wow. I mean, it just sounds like that was when you found meditation, that was just so like light bulb going off, like,
Yeah.
wow. I love that. I know I felt that way when I found yoga and meditation.
Hmm.
Some people who have a trauma history do find that sitting for, extended periods of time or a lot of focus on breath can sometimes have the opposite impact. Like it can trigger them as they go into a more relaxed state, repressed memories can come up. It doesn't sound like you had that experience.
Yeah, no, actually, so that's probably the only immediate negative, if you want to call that a negative thing to meditation. But if not, then those things are just going to remain doormat. And I think it was Carl Jung who said, unless you make the unconscious conscious, then you will go through life and call that fate or something like that. But what it translates to,
Hmm.
if you don't address what's in the inner depths of your unconscious mind, then you're just going to be directed by that,
It
and
rules
you're going
you. Yeah.
to. I mean, and so I remember really the time where I started to go deeper in my meditation was when I went to India and I did a Vipassana course where I sat down for 10 days in silent meditation in a cubicle course, sort of thing, and meditated for those 10 hours every day. And that was the first time, because I'm sitting by myself, for those long hours, that those traumas started to resurface itself. And I mean, thank God that I've been nurturing a relationship with learning how to calm my nervous system, because when those memories come up, then the anger. I thought about the first person who sexually abused me, and who is somewhat still in my life now, and has somewhat of an attitude with me because I called him out on it. And but in those moments of meditation, when those things came to the surface, it was like, okay, how do I deal with this now? I'm feeling this anger, but then you get to the point where you're like, okay, let me watch this anger pass by too. And obviously
Mhm.
that takes much more time and effort and patience, etc. But it's life changing, because you realize that even those moments of bliss that come in meditation, that is also passing by. So
That's right.
then maybe I can cultivate the strength and the patience and the fortitude to also let the opposite arise, and then see what it's trying to teach me. And then it's like, okay, I thought I was healed from this. No, I'm clearly not, and I need to address this, and to somewhat, be present with it. But yeah, so those things that are definitely, they definitely come up. And you know I think each person is different. Some folks may need to seek some extra support with
Mhm.
navigating those emotions. uh, and it's still for myself, those things still are very present with me, and I'm working through it through therapy, through writing my memoir, etc.
Yeah,
But then you realize that every time you don't react to it, the less power those things have over you. And
that's right.
then you're like, okay, I can be present with this discomfort, because that's really what it is. It's a form of discomfort,
Yeah,
and learn that, everything is transitory, so it's already passing me by the moment I become aware of that anger. And if I can just learn to just sit with that anger and not react to the anger, then that anger will pass me by, and then I can possibly gain some insights from it.
yeah. I mean, so much there. So, just to like kind of put some bullet points in, I think
Mm.
by the time you did Vipassana, you had done some stuff before, so you knew a little bit about regulating your system. And I always tell like people don't go straight to a Vipassana like as your first experience because that is quite intense.
Yeah,
That's quite intense.
it's like going
And
it's like going to hot yoga. It's like, oh, I want to go do a hot yoga
yeah,
class. I'm like, bro, like, no, start with cat and cow and work your way to cow.
exactly. You don't
You
want to,
know,
So I think sometimes if people get excited and they find something and they realize they can make a change,
Yep.
the instinct is to go all in, where really it took 20 years to get here. So let's give some time to to back that up. It's not going to be in one day. And sometimes if you go too fast, too
Yeah.
extreme, you can re-traumatize the system. So, I mean, it's good that you were able to have enough of some work that you had done to be your own container for that. And I always feel like people should research, who's the teaching staff there. Do they have any trauma sensitivity training? Do they know what to do? If someone goes into a flashback, or
Mhm.
how to be a safe container for that. Some do and some don't. But you said so many good things just about, just watching how memories and emotions pass. That's such a beautiful thing that we can learn through the practice. Learning how to be okay with being uncomfortable. I would also add learning how to be okay with being comfortable, because for some people that's even more um, challenging, because allowing oneself to be calm, to be blissful, to be okay, almost feels unsafe because they're so used to being hyper vigilant and on guard.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm grateful that I did my yoga retreat, my 200 hours first, then did my first Vipassana, and even the second time I did 300 hours, then I did another Vipassana, because it really taught me. You can hear me, okay, right? Can you hear me?
We had a little blip, but we're back.
Okay. Okay. I was just saying that I was grateful that I did my 200 hours of yoga, then went into Vipassana, and then the 300 hours, and then went back into Vipassana, because during that yoga retreat, like, you really learn how to, hold poses for longer periods of time and then sit with that discomfort. And as my teacher at least was counting in his count, oh my God, Azad, bless his heart, he's like,
So,
one. I'm like, damn, you could have been at 10 by now, bro. But the whole goal is like, learn how to just be patient and
yeah.
breathe through pain and that discomfort, because then you realize that it's gonna pass. It's gonna, next, before you know it, you're out of that. Maybe you're resting in child pose, maybe you're in savasana, and then you're like, okay, that all passed, and now the next emotion has arisen. And but if not, then you're just reacting to every unpleasant sensation. Then that means you're also going to be reacting to every pleasant sensation. And that's, I mean, not to get into the whole Buddhist concept, but there's insights into all religion. But that's what, Buddhism teaches us, that
Yeah.
that's the cycle of suffering, because you're
Yeah.
just constantly reacting to pleasant and unpleasant sensations and not keeping your equilibrium, not keeping that balance of mind, where you can just see things as just passing you by, and instead you just react, and then every reaction has a reaction to it. And so during that yoga retreat, it taught me, and it's continuously teaching me, how to sit with that discomfort, and then the importance of rest when the moments of resting postures come.
Mm.
And I just focus purely on my breath, because then you're resting through those intense poses. You're not thinking about X, Y, or Z, because you're like, oh my God, that next pose is going to come. So let me just be present with this breath and calm my body down. So then that same philosophy I was able to apply in Vipassana. Now, I'm not going to say it's not for the same faint of heart. There were people during the Vipassana retreat that quit the second day, third day, and I
Yeah.
understand that and respect that. They was like, you know what, this is too much for me, and maybe I'll revisit this at another time. I respect that you attempted it, but for me, it was like, I gotta fight through this. I gotta, because when you, and there is almost no greater feeling than when you get through either something that you really worked hard for, especially as it pertains to the mental energy that you had to use, and then the insights that come from that process.
Yeah. And you're right. Every time you're, exposed to a memory, and you don't react,
Hmm.
you're training your body to be able to handle it, and it stops popping up after a while because it's not getting the reaction, um, and that's basically exposure therapy. You're doing that in an embodied way. So it's beautiful what you were giving yourself. Take us to, so you realized this was such an amazing tool for yourself, and obviously you wanted to um, give that to others. So where was that transition?
Yeah, so I, when I look back, I have to give, credit to God, because it was really just the foresight. Because even when I first started my first GoFundMe and I wrote this whole story about why I needed to go to India and why folks should support me, I said like, hey, when I come back, I'm going to create my nonprofit called Fostering Meditation. And I actually was reading something, and then the word fostering came up, and then later on, meditation was a couple of sentences behind it. And I was like, oh, when you foster something, you nurture it, you tend to it, and then meditation is mental development. And so I had that foresight in that moment that I say was divinely inspired. Say, hey, when I come back from this 9 month journey in India, when I went September of 2019, and then when I come back, I'm gonna start my nonprofit. And in that moment, I didn't know anything about nonprofits. I just was kind of advised to start a nonprofit, and then but it also let people know that I'm not just going to India for myself, but that I'm going to learn these practices, and then when I come back, I'm going to help others cultivate these same tools, namely especially young people.
Mhm.
And so when I did get back in June 2020, now the pandemic at its peak, I think around that time the George Floyd murder happened, and so there was a lot of race riots, and rightfully so. Just it was a lot of chaos, and inwardly, and J. Krishnamurti. I'm digressing just for a second, but J. Krishnamurti, who was an Indian philosopher, I once read that he's no longer with us in this realm, but he said, the chaos in the world is only a reflection of the chaos and the disorder within ourselves.
Mm,
So we seek in vain to address the chaos externally unless we seek to address the disorder within ourselves. And so that's been that whole premise of me going to India to first learn how to navigate and help regulate that disorder within myself from all of my traumatic experiences, and then help other young people. And so when I came back, I started my nonprofit Fostering Meditation. Got the 501c3, and they got a fiscal sponsor, etc. And then the whole mission was just to really teach other young people really what would have helped me as a child learn how to regulate my breathing, learn how to use yoga. And you have a lot of religious folks. I just had a conversation about this morning, actually, that are like, oh, don't do that, that's the devil. And we don't tend to any of those practices that's calling spirits. And funny, digress another second, for my Amish family, I'm going there this weekend, and my brother texted me a couple of weeks ago and was like, hey, I had a few friends told me about meditation and yoga, and that's summoning different spirits. So I'm going to ask you respectfully not to practice any of that while at the family gathering and whatever. And I'm going to have that conversation with him in person, because that's not something to have over text message.
yes.
But once again, at its minimalist, we're just breathing and stretching, and we know how much the body stores. I mean, what's that book called? The body keeps the score,
Mhm.
and how the body, stores all of that trauma, that anxiety, that stress within it. And then, so as I tell my students, etc., focus on what you feel like after class, and then 10 out of 10, they're like, I feel more calm, I feel more centered. Then you know that yes, there are religious aspects of the yoga and meditation, but you don't have to go into that deep. You can just keep it very surface level. Just learn how to regulate your breathing, which is something that, whether you are into meditation or not, you should learn how to do, because it's never, although it's something that automatically is part of our autonomic nervous system. It's something that it's the only part of our physiology that we can control, that has an immediate impact on our nervous system. So it's something that it should be taught universally, just off the strength of it being a tool that we can instantly control to regulate ourselves, and
Mhm.
rather than reacting to everything. Um, and so that's been a whole mission, is to teach these young people, especially in the inner city of Harlem and elsewhere, how to nurture themselves through breath work, through sitting with themselves, how to use yoga. And then I added eventually nutrition, because a lot of these kids are walking into schools with batalillos and bacon, egg, and cheeses and big cookies. I never forget, one of my seventh graders walked in the class in May sometime, and he had this big gigantic chocolate chip cookie that he was like, oh, after eating, he's like, oh, Mr. D, I can't sit still. I'm like, Pa, you can't sit still because you just had a whole piece of chocolate sugary cookie
Yeah.
that's running through your bloodstream right now, and it got you so active. So you don't know better until you don't do better until you know better. And so, introducing young kids to, I remember when I introduced them to, what was it? Well, one, coconut water, which none of the kids liked, maybe two. But what was it? Was it dates? Yeah, it was dates. And now I got a third grader ask me recently, "Oh, Mr. D, can you bring dates tomorrow?" And
Oh,
so just exposing them to different healthier, foods. So because we know that there's a strong relationship between behavior and diet. And so,
Yes.
no one's really addressing it like that. Like, hey, you know what you eat in the morning is gonna have an impact on your mood, and how
Yeah.
your is how your actions are going to be, and your actions are based off of your result. It's going to impact your results, and your results is a whole freaking cycle. And so that's been a whole mission, is just to introduce meditation and yoga, healthy eating, and then adding that with cathartic writing, or just a moment where they can be reflective in their writing, because
Mm.
sometimes we share things through writing that we don't feel comfortable sharing verbally, and then holding space in the community for those realizations to be shared.
Wow. Yeah, that's a lot. That's
I
covering,
know.
you
That's
know.
how these go.
That's
These
interesting. I
are.
didn't know you were doing the writing. We just did an episode on therapeutic journaling.
Oh yeah, yeah.
Which was
Mhm.
excellent if you get a chance to listen to it. And I totally agree. The woman spoke about, sometimes people don't want to say something to their therapist, but they'll like write it and let them read it. Um, and whichever way, I think a theme from our conversation today, you've been talking a lot about like sharing our story, sharing your story. We didn't really say it like pointedly, but how sharing your story helped you to process it and also to like own it in a new way. Like, and that comes from another form of therapy, narrative, which I really love as well, where it's like you get to tell your story. It's your story to tell from your point of view. And you kind of get to rewrite your story with your lessons and with like your own empowerment of how you want to frame it.
Mhm. And
And
I'm
yeah,
grateful. Okay. No, I was just saying I'm grateful because ever since a little boy, writing and reading was always, especially reading was the way I escaped my traumatic experiences, and then writing was the way I tried to make sense of it. And
yeah,
so I've always been appreciative for writing. And then some of the things that my kids have shared, that they didn't want to share verbally, but they're like, "Hey, you can read what I wrote," and I'm like, "Wow, who would have known that you're carrying?" And I honestly think that this generation now, they, because they're exposed to more, that they're processing more and not knowing how to manage their emotions. And so I'm like, wow, who would have thought that this little, fourth grader is carrying so much, and then it doesn't help when, unfortunately, the parents sometimes, they haven't addressed their own trauma. And
yeah,
so, they got the parents yelling at them, and the parents getting divorced. And a lot of my kids, I think I got, off the top of my head, no more than 5 kids, and I work at a school from 3 years old to eighth grade. I think at least under 5 kids that I know personally that have a mom and dad in the home. Most of the kids just have either one parent, no parent, or in some type
yep,
of system. You know what I
yep,
mean? And so they're not learning how to regulate themselves, and they're not learning from a household that is, providing that nurturance in that way that's going to help them develop. Instead, sometimes, unfortunately, they're re-traumatizing their children, and they're not learning how to navigate through those emotions.
no. Well, hopefully you'll be that spark that
Yeah.
helps them to break some of those cycles, those relationship
Hmm.
cycles and trauma cycles. So you're in one school and you're seeing kids of all ages.
Yes, so this is Bronx Works, I believe the school is called, and so I've been partnering with the school for about 3 years now, 3 or 4 years. I've come in and taught the classes, which I am grateful for the school that I work at, PS 108, where I'm there from 8 to 2 during the school year, because as you know, we transformed which was actually my former detention center, into a meditation room,
Yeah,
and we invested about maybe 16, 17 thousand dollars into transform, and I wanted to, even standing on a 6 foot ladder to paint the ceiling, because I wanted to change every type of energy in the space to
yeah,
make it so that when children walk in, and I'll never forget, I got so many stories about this space, but this little girl who just migrated from South America, and no one could calm this little girl down. She was in a hallway, banging her head against the wall, punching the water fountain, or the water fountain. And me being a meditation teacher and doing what I do in the building, as I would walk by and I saw that, I just couldn't do anything but to intervene. And so tried to, put my voice in the meditative mode, but she wasn't trying to hear that. I ran upstairs and got a singing bowl, tried to come downstairs and play it for her. She had 10 seconds of attention for that, but then went back into being hysterical. Then I said, why don't we bring this young child? Why don't we bring the child up to the meditation room? Because I knew, first of all, the lights are mad bright in the hallways. That is subconsciously probably aggravating her. And then there's other people in the hallway, so she doesn't feel safe probably. So then she came up to the meditation room, and then instantly the lights are dim. You have LED lights on. The lavender essential oil is already in the hallway of this space. Then you have this waterfall, a mirror waterfall that the kids touch to make a wish. And so once she got into the room, she went from 10 to at least 7 or 6. And then I started playing all the singing bowls for her. We had a little background music, but it wasn't really until she touched the waterfall and then feeling that coolness of the water running down her hands that she began to calm down, so much so that when she walked out the room, you would have thought that, like, I hate to say it, but like a demonic spirit just left her. And then
Mm.
she came back to her own consciousness. And that was like a proof of concept that, what, we need to create more spaces inside of schools where children, staff, because I got teachers coming to me on the
Yeah,
regular, like, "Teachers, you got time for a one-on-one
I
at this?"
bet.
You know what I mean? And I'm
I
like,
know
hey,
it.
just come on in. And once again, like, if I was teaching in a space like this where I'm at now, it's okay. I'm grateful because I can, but it just would put more, they put more energy for me to kind of calm them down
Yeah,
versus this room was decked out with, just calming images on a wall. The whole floor is plastered with a mat that they feel comfortable to flip and do all those flexible moves on. They had some soft music in the background. So my point is that I've seen firsthand how creating spaces for young people and children, staff, etc., that inside of these, especially because of school, because that's where we have the children for the most part of their days, and them realizing that, what, when things are getting hectic, I can go to the meditation room,
yeah.
I can go and center myself, and then now building the second one for children with autism. I'm super excited once this gets
Mm,
started early September, just to see how these young children who are neurodiverse learn how to regulate themselves, so that we can show that, hey, we got the general ed, and then we got these neurodiverse children all learning how to regulate their nervous systems. Which, I don't know how much, to wrap up my point, I don't know how much math or geography or science they're going to remember, but they're walking out of this building learning the importance of breath control, learning the importance of diet, learning how yoga, not forget all the spiritual parts of yoga, just how stretching your body, raising your palms up and down, downward dog, etc., cat and cow, how that can release tension in your shoulders,
yeah.
in your spine, etc. And that's what we need to, I think, really, no, I don't think, I know we need to continue to invest in and help spread, so that we can combat the mental health crisis.
Whew, that's right. I don't know if you know, but I taught in a school the last year. I was an aide in a school, and I felt so ill from the environment. Not the kids, guys. I love the kids, but the sterile environment, the lights, the colors, the sounds. It's harsh. It's really, really harsh. I think what you're doing is so important, so effective. I've seen it firsthand. I just did yoga with a summer camp at a school, and the kids love it. They react immediately to the breathing. I took them into our courtyard a few times just to get out of the gym school environment and just be in nature, hear the birds, feel the sun as they're breathing. So, it's whatever we can do, because our kids are reacting naturally to
Hmm.
unnatural situation. And as you said so eloquently, I don't know what any of us remember from high school, but you will tools that you can use to learn later, because when you're relaxed, you're going to learn more, you're going to be more creative, you're going to solve problems in more inventful ways. Everything is going to be better no matter what field you decide to go into. So thank you for what you're doing for the youth, and for sharing your story with the listeners. Just shout out for people, like how they can support you if they want to support you and your organization, your next
Yeah.
steps, all that stuff.
Yeah, no, good deal. So my nonprofit is called Fostering Meditation, and fosteringmeditation.org. And right now, the next goal, like I said, is to just get the second meditation room done. And then, so I'm always receiving, like, if folks want to donate meditation pillows or yoga mats, because ultimately I want to get the kids, to keep the meditation pillows, the yoga mats at home with them, so that they, at least when they see it, they're reminded of their yoga practice, their meditation practice, etc. And so, And then the word of mouth, also passing the word to other schools, et cetera, so that we can raise more funding, so that we can transform more spaces inside of these schools. And then, ideally, my vision is that, imagine every school has, a wellness, if not a room, then at least a space where folks can go and and deregulate themselves, or rather regulate themselves from being dysregulated,
Yeah.
rather than, just because I didn't see teachers. I had one colleague one day, she lost her own cool, and so she grabbed the kid by his neck and,
Ooh,
wrestled him against the wall. And I walked by, and eventually I told her, when she was by herself, I was like, hey, if the principal, or let's say the superintendent or someone saw that, then you would probably be without a job. Yeah, I understand sometimes these kids can be triggering, but the onus and responsibility is on us to regulate ourselves first and foremost. And so teachers are dysregulated, staff are dysregulated, children are dysregulated.
yep.
So once again, more spaces, and then helping them nurture the tools so they can regulate themselves before they have to be regulated by society in egregious ways.
That's right. Yeah, that's right. Prevention. So, folks, if you have access to funding or access to props, let's flood Demetrius with some, cushions and mats and waterfalls, and I know my daughter loves the crystals to
Yeah.
touch, and just all that stuff. Or if you know a supplier or something, someone that can help Demetrius to fill these spaces. Beautiful lamps, scarves, like great tactile tools for these
Mhm.
kids to help them have a more beautiful environment. Um,
Yeah.
let's get them to you. And thank you so much for your time today and always. And send me some pictures if you can of the room that you created, and we'll share with people,
Okay.
everything you're doing.
We'll do it. And then just on that last point, when he was like, especially getting the second room done for these autistic children, like, a lot of them are sensory based. And so just little, fidgets, or weighted blankets. I sleep with a weighted blanket every night, and that helps me calm me down and put me in a good night's sleep.
Yeah,
And so small things that we can give to the children, so that they can, keep their attention present. And then, because usually when they're dysregulated, their attention is sporadic. And
yeah,
so, the power of the small things. So thank you again, Laura.
yeah. Thank you. Thank you. I know we both have a 1 o'clock, so thank you so much. And I will be talking to you soon.
Yes, man. Thank you.
Take care.